Hi there, I'm Kirk Harnack, Vice President of Telos Systems, and a broadcast station owner myself and engineer. Hey, I'm here to talk to you about the Telos VX, and let's kind of walk through the how it works, what some of the parts are, what some of the technologies are that make it work, and how it can really improve telephones and the voice of callers in whatever production you're doing, whether it's radio or television or podcasting, and also how you can save money in doing it. Because you certainly can as we move into this new world of SIP, Session Initiation Protocol. We'll explain that as we go through. Well, this is Telos VX, the future of broadcast phones. That's the name of our webinar. And we're talking about the Telos VX talk show system and the technology that goes into it and surrounds it. The Telos VX talk show system, I like to say any phone line, any studio, and every talker says it sounds better. But let's get on the same page. What is Telos VX? Well, it's an on-air talk show system. It's multi-line, multi-studio, and it natively, from the telco or from your phone system, it speaks native VoIP SIP. And we'll explain more about that in just a few minutes. Who's using the Telos VX talk show system right now? Well, some big broadcasters are. Some small broadcasters are, too. People like CNN, ESPN Radio, WCBS News Radio 880 in New York, ABC World News with Diane Sawyer. Hey, the Channel 9 in Oklahoma City uses it as they do, believe it or not, tornado play-by-play as they try to keep people safe in their viewing area. The Twit Network, Leo Laporte on the Premier Radio Network uses it for the Tech Guy show. Southern Cross Austereo uses it across their network. And the Tom Leykis show, which is now on the internet totally, plus Cox Radio and even Edward Jones as they do their podcast, plus many, many more. In fact, there are 300 Telos VX systems in operation on the air now as we speak here in June of 2014 as this podcast is recorded. You get a few pictures of some installations where folks are using it. This is at a radio station in Indianapolis. This is part of Emmis Communications, a little news workstation here where they do interviews and produce some news cuts. Also, here's a control room with the Telos VX integrated with a Harris audio console there. This is a VX that's integrated into WCPN FM in Cleveland, Ohio. You can see they have a controller there built into the console for controlling calls. This is a call screening telephone at WCPN, so obviously it lets them screen calls before air. Here's WCBS in New York. News Radio 880, they have a couple of the VSET 12 phones next to their console, their Harris console there. And this is one of the news reporter positions at WCBS, so they can get phone actualities. Here's Cox Media in Tampa, Florida, Hot 101.5. They put callers on the air, do plenty of pre-recorded callers for requests and so forth at this Cox station in Tampa, Florida. This is a small station in Vacaville, California, with a Telos VX system there in their control room. Here's a news gathering area at an all-news station in Atlanta, owned by Cumulus. And they have an Axia intercom system as well as a Telos VX system there for their reporters to get actualities and interviews. This is a studio that was actually under construction when this picture was taken. It's now the studio for America's Morning Show. It's done here in Nashville, Tennessee, where I am, with Blair Garner and a bunch of affiliates. They do a country music show with live artists in studio, and they take a lot of phone calls there as well. And here's another picture of the news gathering area at a station in Atlanta, Georgia, with Telos VX. So let's ask the question, why is Telos VX good for broadcasters, and by implication, broadcast engineers? For me, the main feature is better call quality. Better now and even better in the future. You know, most calls to your station now are probably digital from end to end. I mean, people calling in on SIP phones from their office, or maybe they have a cell phone, and that's going to be digital from end to end. And it's digital all the way till it gets to you at your radio station. If you're still using POTS lines, well, then it's not digital, and you're the bottleneck for quality at that point. Omnia audio processing is on every hybrid or on every fader that you're bringing callers up with the Telos VX system. So you can get better audio quality thanks to audio processing. And here's something very cool. HD voice. You may have heard this term bandied about a bit. This is the telephone industry's term for any one of several codecs that offer 7 kilohertz of audio quality instead of 3 kilohertz. And 7 kilohertz is, well, as a broadcast engineer, you may think, well, that's a step down. But believe me, it's a step way up from normal telephone quality, which is about 3 kilohertz. So HD voice is available now to your station employees. You send them out in the field with a smartphone with a G.722 smartphone app on it, and you can have your own people calling into your station, reporting, doing live remotes with 7 kilohertz, and it sounds pretty good. And then it's coming for the public at large in the future as cell companies, cell carriers, move over to new codecs like AMR wideband, and the Telos VX is ready for that. So, few reasons why VX sounds better. VX can save you money on your phone lines. Not guaranteed to. It depends on your situation. But you could have a 12 to 18-month return on investment, or ROI, possible by switching away from POTS lines and going to SIP. Again, it depends on what kind of SIP lines that you go to and how much you're paying for POTS now. But as an example, here in Nashville, a good friend of mine is paying about $90 per month per POTS line. So he's paying about $900 every month for the POTS lines for his studios. Well, going to certain kinds of SIP lines could get him down in the $100 per month area or even less. So big return on investment is possible depending on how you elect to go. Sharing phone lines now becomes easy, really easy. You don't have to move patch cords around to move phone lines to a different studio in case you need to do your show from a different studio. It's really a matter of punching about 3 or 4 buttons on a VSET and introducing a show definition into the studio that you're in right now. So line sharing, studio mobility becomes possible, and thanks to SIP, it actually becomes possible to, if you have to move to a totally different studio across town or across the country, SIP makes mobility very possible, something that it's really hard to do with POTS or ISDN lines. Another reason to do this is because, hey, engineers, you and me, we need to know about this technology because it's inevitable. It's already here for most business phone systems, and it seems that on-air phone systems are some of the last to switch over to SIP technology. The whole internet is delivered by IP, as is the very video you're watching right now. Your phone calls will be delivered by IP as well. And, if you do it right, if you kind of get some understanding of the key basics and what's important with making voice over IP and SIP, making that work well, it really does sound good. And it's every bit as reliable as the connections that you've been accustomed to. So, tell you what, instead of keeping the questions bridled until the end of this, let's go ahead and answer some questions right now. And maybe this will take care of some of your curiosity. These are the questions that I tend to get asked pretty often about Telos VX. Can VX work with my existing phone lines? Well, the answer is yes, absolutely. You can convert POTS, ISDN, T1, or PRI lines into SIP. You can do it a couple of ways. One way is by using any one of several gateway devices. These are appliances. They're typically a few $100s up to a couple $1,000s. And they convert, these various different phone methodologies, POTS, ISDN, T1, or PRI, into the SIP protocol over IP. You can also convert these things using an asterisk-based SIP server, or others as well. For example, if you have a business PBX where you're bringing phone lines into it, a lot of business PBXs can entertain more SIP clients, and that's what the Telos VX would be to that. So you can use your own asterisk SIP server, build it yourself, buy it from somebody else, have a consultant, or have Telos make that available to you and convert lines that way. Because you can put line cards into an asterisk SIP server and convert, for example, PRI into SIP that way. Adding an asterisk-based SIP server can also give you more functionality, like HD voice connections from mobile station employees, as I talked about a minute ago. You can get voicemail if you like. And here's something important to some folks. You can have spoken legal disclaimers read to callers as they call in and before they go to air. So if your legal department wants them to have a disclaimer, no problem. An asterisk phone system can do that for you. So, can I get new VoIP or SIP phone lines? And how? Well, yes, you can. Your existing telephone company may offer SIP service. However, when you check with them, be prepared that you might get a runaround. Not every big entrenched telephone provider is very well equipped to talk to you about their SIP offerings at this point. That's going to get better over time. It has to. Otherwise, the competing telcos are going to continue to eat their lunch. Competing telcos are another source. Companies like XO Communications, Time Warner, Windstream, and others, they may offer wired or fiber service directly into your facility. And if they don't have fiber or wired facilities nearby your station, they may lease it from AT&T, Verizon, or whoever the incumbent is to bring those services in. So this is kind of like the professional way to get SIP into your station directly. It's from a competing telco that offers it and offers the guaranteed connectivity into your facility. And the third way to do it here is with a solid internet connection. You can choose from dozens of cloud-based SIP providers like Vitality, RingCentral, OneVoIP, and 8x8. Now, my own radio stations, we've been using 8x8 for years for our business calls. We're still on POTS for our studio calls, but that's changing soon. So we found it to be just perfectly reliable for business calls, very flexible. We can plug a phone in anywhere and answer the phone from anywhere. It easily pass calls back and forth. SIP just makes it easy and very reliable. We have good internet service at our radio stations, and if you do too, you can do that. So what are SIP and VoIP, or VoIP and SIP? Well, voice is simply Voice over Internet Protocol, VoIP. It's defined as a method for talking over computer networks, like I'm doing right now. SIP is Session Initiation Protocol. Now, that's the most popular standard for making VoIP connections. It makes familiar devices like telephones work the way that we're familiar with. VoIP on its own has lots of ways to work that wouldn't be very familiar to us as users. But SIP helps make all that easy, and it's easy to implement into SIP VoIP telephones and software to, you can do dialing and answer the phone just like you normally would with a good old-fashioned wired POTS telephone. So why do I think SIP is better than POTS T1 or ISDN? Well, okay, here's one reason. There's a wide choice of SIP providers out there, and they're in competition with each other. You can play the market. You can get quotes. You can, jockey for the lowest price on guaranteed SIP connections or service. With POTS and ISDN, typically you have exactly one choice. And if you don't like that choice, well, that's just too bad. That's the company that you have to buy it from. But SIP can come from quite a variety of companies. And with number portability, if you don't like the company that you first choose, well, you do have the option of moving to another company. And it's not as painful as you might imagine because, hey, for all of our lives, we've been dealing with one phone company that may have been painful to deal with at times. There are options for bringing SIP into your facility. As we already mentioned, you can go with one of these companies that brings their own connectivity in, fiber or wired, or they lease someone else's, and they guarantee it up to a DMARC point. But you can also use internet connectivity, and you can supply the level and quality of internet that you think is appropriate for this. So you can get great cable modem service or solid DSL service with very low jitter. You could go with, if you have to, a wireless service like Clearwire or even 4G LTE. I wouldn't recommend those for full-time phone service, but you know what? They do work, and they're great backups. Another advantage is money savings. SIP over POTS T1 or ISDN. That money savings could be small or could be huge, depending on the provider and the type of SIP deliveries we talked about. Hunt groups. Well, now there's something that's painful to deal with the phone company. You have to have the phone company set up a hunt group. You have one number and it rings, or some people call it a rollover group. With SIP, you define that yourself. It's actually pretty cool, and once you understand what you're doing, it's pretty easy. You can change the hunt groups as needed. Hey, imagine that, oh my gosh, it's time for our fundraiser. I'm going to need a hunt group of 25 phone lines. You can do that with SIP, and you can do that yourself. You don't have to depend upon the phone company to set that up for you. Audio quality, this is a big one. With POTS or ISDN, audio quality really can't get any better. There's nowhere to go. Sure, we can do audio processing to it, and that makes it somewhat better. But audio quality is already better with SIP because you're keeping the same ones and zeros produced at the encoding device. It's quite possible that those same ones and zeros are not getting transcoded, that they're coming all the way into your Telos VX as they were generated. And so there could be no transcoding and as good a quality as you can have. By the way, the quality will be even better as HD voice comes into play, which again, you can do that now to some degree. And POTS and ISDN can never do HD voice. They're not set up that way, and they never ever will be. So SIP is the way to go for improved audio quality in the future. How do you get SIP VoIP service? Well, there are several ways to do this. And actually, I should say, how do you get SIP VoIP into your Telos VX? That's really the question. Well, you can keep your existing service as is. Your POTS, your ISDN, your T1. You can convert it to SIP at your facility. There's no cost savings there. There's no audio quality improvement. In fact, you got to spend some money on a gateway type device or an asterisk server, but you can do that. So you can keep the service that you have and convert it into SIP. You can order SIP from your telco or a competing telco. They will bring wires or fiber directly into your facility. And a third way is you can order SIP from an internet cloud SIP provider and then supply your own good quality connection to the internet. So just reiterating some points that we made, that's how you get SIP into your Telos VX. Here's a question I get a lot. Does Telos VX work with non-Axia consoles? Well, yes, of course it does. I mean, CNN doesn't have Axia consoles. They have, big honking TV consoles. Telos works with any audio consoles of any brand. And the reason it does is because using either a Telos audio interface or an Axia X node, either one, you can get AES audio in and out of the VX system, or you can get analog audio in and out of the VX system. So those are the two devices that we use to get that audio in and out. You can place one of these nodes in each studio if you need that much I/O in each studio, or you can centrally locate such nodes to have, probably better I/O density. You'll end up using all of the ins and outs if you do it that way and centrally locate them. But sure, you have options to make this happen. There's also options for GPIO, so you can get contact closures in and out of the Telos VX system, like to flash a light when a phone line rings, or to mute a ringer when the mic comes on. Let's take a look at this overview diagram here. This is an overview of the how the Telos VX engine sits between the WAN connection and the LAN connection. Now, I'll give you a preview here. The Telos VX has two Ethernet connections on the back of it. We'll take a closer look at that shortly. But one side is called the WAN side, and that's where your SIP comes into it, either having been converted from POTS or ISDN, or just coming directly from a cloud provider or from a wired provider, probably through a router or at least a switch, and then on into the Telos VX's WAN port. You can also plug these VSET telephones into the WAN port network, as well as call screening computers. Put them over there if you want to. Over on the right-hand side here, over on the LAN side, that's the whole LiveWire world. That's where we're distributing audio in and out of the VX, very high-quality audio. It's 48 kilohertz sampled, 24-bit bit depth. So this is perfect quality audio, digitally delivered with low latency to nodes or directly into your Axia LiveWire LAN if you already have that. So that whole side there deals with the studio side audio, and you can plug your VSET phones into that network as well. Either side will work. Your call screening computers as well could go on the LAN side, so you have some flexibility. Let's take a look at the system components and a little bit of detail on those. Here's the VX engine. This little guy is a hoss. It is 2 rack units. The thing weighs, 20-something pounds. It is heavy. It's heavy because of those big heat sinks. There's no fan. It is perfectly silent. You can stick it right next to the microphone and you'll never hear it. But it does give you flexibility as far as where to put it. You can pop it in the studio if that's a convenient place to have it. It does have those big heat sinks on the sides. It has an Intel processor in it that we have made a custom board around and given it some redundancy in there. It is really well engineered, especially well thermally engineered. It's going to sit there and run and run and run. To my knowledge, there have been no failures of these VX engines in the field since we introduced them. And at least as far as the VX engine, there are over 300 of them now around the world in the field processing phone calls right now. The backside of the VX engine, you've got 2 power supplies. They're redundant. It can run off both of them equally, or it can run off one or the other. You can plug one into commercial power and the other into UPS or dual UPSs, however you want to do that at your facility. The DVI and the USB connectors are not used in the field, but the WAN and the LiveWire Ethernet connections are. So the WAN Ethernet, obviously, that goes to the WAN that we talked about earlier with VSET phones, and certainly that's where your phone connections come in. And the live wire side goes to the studio gear. Here's some more components. There are controllers. We call these phones. They're really controllers, though. They control what goes on the air. You can pick up the phone and talk to a caller that way for a private conversation or screen calls. You have some extra buttons to, put people on hold, put people on screened hold. You can block all the lines, busy them all out if you want to do that. There's even a button to instigate a profanity delay, give you a contact closure out to initiate that if you want to. Of course, you can answer and make phone calls from these as well. And you can decide which fader in a multi-fader system, which fader that a given line is going to be going through if you need to specify that. So the VSET 6 accommodates 6 lines, and the VSET 12 accommodates a show with up to 12 lines. Some other components, if you have an Element console, you can use the Axia Element Call Controller to take your calls and control them. That's a module that goes in the Element console. There's also the Axia IQ Console Telephone Expansion Unit. That just plugs into an existing Axia IQ console. It can also work with the Axia Radius console. It'll only handle up to a 6-line show. But if 6 lines is enough for you for a given show, then there you go. That IQ console expansion will work quite nicely for you. Coming soon from Axia in the fall of 2014 is the Axia Fusion. We'll be shipping. You can get a call controller module for it. It's quite beautiful, and the aesthetics match the rest of the Axia Fusion console. So there are some ways right there. We also have coming console electronics for third-party consoles, just as we did for previous phone systems like the 2X12 and the 2101 and the NX12. We do have coming, not available yet, as of June 2014, not available yet, but coming, drop-in electronics that your console manufacturer can put their metal work on so it looks great, looks the same as the other metal in the console, and you can fully control the VX system from that. So again, a reminder, here's a couple of ways to control your talk shows and your request lines with a VX, either a phone sitting there or a built-in controller in your console. Some other components, here's Axia X nodes. These are half-rack width units. They give you analog or AES-EBU. Or there's a combo node that I didn't mention here. It's got some analog and a little bit of AES-EBU plus some GPIO on it. And you can also just get a full GPIO node from Axia, from the X nodes. Also from Axia, there's available the X switch. If you need a quality Ethernet switch that you don't have to configure because it's pre-configured for LiveWire. Of course, it'll work with anything else too. HTTP, FTP. It's a standard switch, but the internal fine point settings are set up to optimize LiveWire. You can use this switch. This switch is kind of cool in that it does have 2 gigabit connectors on it. It has 2 SFP connectors, so if you want to run fiber to it, you absolutely can. If you've got to make a long run or if you're in an RF-intensive environment, that makes it quite nice. You can also have, you do have 4 100 base T ports that have PoE, power over Ethernet, and that's real convenient. You can run other X nodes, or you can run the phones with that as well, because both of those can be powered by PoE. And then there are 4 100 base T ports on there, which are just 100 base T ports. There's no PoE on those. Another option for getting I/O, audio in and out, from your VX system is with the Telos branded VX audio interface. These, there's a few dealers around the world who are not Axia dealers, but they are Telos dealers. And so this is available to Telos dealers for audio in and out. It has 8 stereo ins and 8 stereo outs. And there's also the GPIO interface option that's available too. So these work great, and this is how all the first VX systems went in. So another question I get asked, I guess I should have put this in the FAQs. Okay, how many lines will this handle, and how many hybrids does it have? Well, the answer is actually a little bit squishy. It's kind of like asking, how many programs can your computer run at the same time? Well, I guess that depends on if you're talking about Final Cut Pro or Solitaire. Final Cut Pro, you're probably doing well to run one instance of that. Solitaire, you could run a bunch of them. So, we used to think about this because we had actual physical plugs on the back of these things. A 1X6, for example, from Telos would have 1 hybrid and 6 lines. A 2X12, 2 hybrids and 12 lines. An NX12 had up to 4 hybrids and 12 lines. The VX, well, it's different. because SIP is different. SIP is kind of a virtual thing. So the best way to measure the capability or the size constraint or the metric to measure a VX is how many faders am I going to feed with telephone calls? Not so much hybrids, because there's a hybrid on every single line that's registered in the VX engine. So that's not a good measure anymore. But the question is, how many destinations do you want to send this to? Let's talk about lines real quick in the SIP world. A line can be registered but not in use, or not assigned to a show, I should say. It could be registered and in a show. It could be idle. Nobody's calling in on it. It could be ringing at that moment. It could be on a handset having a conversation, or it could be on hold. And then it could also finally be on air. And that's what takes the most CPU power, because we're doing a lot to that phone call. We're doing audio processing, and we're doing a hybriding and a lot of sample rate conversion to convert the sample rates in the SIP system to the sample rates of the LiveWire system. So there's a lot going on to put a call on the air, and that's where most of the CPU power of the VX is taken up. So again, you could have hundreds of SIP line registrations. Some of these would be in use, some would be idle or not doing anything or not part of a show, but you could, if you wanted to, have literally hundreds of SIP line registrations. You can have dozens of lines active in shows. So here I've shown, 5 shows, each with 12 lines and ... to a couple of 6-line shows. So it'll handle all the active shows that you could give it for the number of faders. So here's the number you're interested in. It's 25 console faders or caller outputs in use. So the VX engine will feed 25 console faders throughout your facility. And what does that look like? Well, it might look like this. Let's say you have 8 control rooms, and in each control room you want to have 2 faders for callers. Now, by the way, you can put more than one caller on any given fader. So if for some reason you need to button mash 2 callers or 3 callers together or 4 callers, you could do that. And it only takes up 1 fader and counts as 1 in this count of 25. So 8 control rooms, 2 faders apiece, that's 16 faders. 5 production rooms, let's say, with 1 fader apiece, that's a grand total of 21. And then let's say you have some call screening going on. Well, call screening does take up a little bit of CPU power. Let's say it's 2 call screeners, per count of 1 fader. How about that? That's probably accurate enough. So now we're up to a total of 23, what I was calling faders. 21 real faders and 4 call screeners. We're under the 25 mark in this kind of setup for Telos VX. How about the system architecture? How does it plug in? Well, 2 different architectures here. They'd vary a little bit depending on whether you have Axia consoles and LiveWire or whether you don't have Axia consoles, but you are going to have LiveWire when you do this. So here's what it looks like. It can look like plugging into an Axia LiveWire system. Really, the LAN port, that is the LiveWire port of the VX, just plugs into the LiveWire LAN. It just plugs into a port on the switch. It should be a gigabit port because there can be quite a few phone conversations going on here, quite a few streams. So you plug the gig port, the LiveWire port of the VX engine, into a gig port on your existing LiveWire LAN. And then you can plug VSET phones in, as I mentioned earlier, on the LiveWire LAN or on the WAN side. Same thing for call screening computers. Plug them in on either side. And then you do some configuration by typing into your VX engine and into your audio consoles, and voila, you've got phone callers on the air in shows that make sense. Now, if you don't have Axia consoles, again, don't worry. We've got you covered. You just need to build a small, could be a very small, Axia network. There will be an Ethernet switch involved, and this will be a switch that we've approved for LiveWire. Could be as small as a Cisco 8-port 2960 switch, or it could go on up to pretty large, depending on the size of your facility. In a lot of facilities, a 24-port switch from Cisco is going to work just fine. To that switch, you're going to have connected some VX analog interfaces, or AES interface, or some X nodes from Axia, either way. Those audio interfaces, whether they're analog or AES, they're going to connect to your consoles. And they're going to connect to your audio router if you have an audio router. Of course, there's GPIO interfaces available as well. And those VSETs in the studios, well, they can connect to that Ethernet switch. They can connect to Ethernet switches that are then plugged into that Ethernet switch, as long as they're all Axia capable. Or they can plug into the WAN side with perhaps some unmanaged switches from that side. So either way there will work. But the point is, your audio for the studios, that needs to be in a live wire environment, indicating an approved Cisco switch and nodes, either from Telos or from Axia. So what do? If you're planning a VX system for your facility, count the number of faders that you want to have callers on in your facility. Don't forget about call screeners. Count them 2 for 1 for faders if you would, and should be good to go with that. Then decide, do I want 1 VX engine or maybe I want 2? Some people buy an extra one for backup. Okay, it's kind of an expensive backup, but if you need it, it's there. You could also divide your stations. If you have a cluster of studios, divide your stations so that some of them are using 1 VX engine and some are using another VX engine. And I would do that with stations that don't tend to want to transfer calls back and forth. That could be done, but it's more to set up. So maybe your music stations are on 1 VX engine and your sports talk and news talk stations are on another VX engine. So that's one possibility. Mix and match how you like, whatever you're comfortable with, but as long as you've got no more than 25 outputs or faders per VX engine. If you already have a LiveWire network, as we mentioned before, you simply plug that VX engine LiveWire port into a gigabit port on the Axia network. So it could look like the ones I've called out there, and just plug that in and make sure they have the right IP addresses, and you're good to go. If you are planning your audio input and output, let's talk about this, because let me go back. If you're in a already existing Axia console environment, then you've already got all the paths that you need for the caller audio, for the mix-minus audio, and for your program on hold. But if you're installing this in a system, in an environment where you don't have Axia consoles, then you're going to want to know, well, how many nodes do I need? How many audio inputs and outputs do I need? Well, you need 1 output per fader. You need 1 input per fader to handle the mix-minus coming back to the caller from your console. And you need 1 more input from each studio, and that would be your program on hold. Now, that's for each unique program on hold. So if you've got a control room and a production room, and the production room is, more or less associated with that control room, you can just feed it that 1 program on hold from that 1 control room and use that for any of the shows that you want to in the VX. Point is, you only have to feed it once into the VX system. You can use it for multiple shows or studios if you want to do that. So generally, if you have a 1 fader studio, 1 caller fader, you need 1 node out, 1 node in, and another node in for program on hold. And a 2 fader studio obviously needs 2 node outputs, 2 node inputs, and 1 more node input for the program on hold if you have a unique program on hold there. So that's why I said earlier, with the small little X node, that can work out well for 1 X node per studio. If you want to stick them in the studios, you got local wiring to your console, that can make it easy. Or you could put it in the rack room and wire to your routing system or central wiring area if that works better. So, call control, phones and apps. Well, to control your callers on the air and to do call screening, you're going to need a VSET 12 or VSET 6. And that'll depend on the number of lines in the biggest show you're going to run in that studio. Obviously, a VSET 6 will handle up to a 6-line show, but you can't see line 7, 8, 9, or 10, and so forth. A 12-line VSET can handle anything from 1 line up to 12. You can also get hardware controllers that drop into Axia consoles and coming controllers that drop into third-party consoles. Then there's call management software. Now, this is pretty cool because unlike previous call management software, so the newer crop of call management software, most of them offer audio in the PC. So you can take a USB headset, plug it into the PC that's running one of these call screening apps meant for VX, and you get the caller audio in your headset. You don't need a separate telephone. Welcome to buy one. We'd love that, but you don't have to have it. So you can pick up calls in the software and talk to the people that you pick up on your headset right through the computer itself, and that can work just fine. A detail about the VSETs, you can power them using PoE, power over Ethernet. So that can come from that Axia X switch or from a third-party PoE switch, or it can come, of course, from the PoE injector that we provide along with every VSET. So you don't have to have a PoE switch, which can be expensive. You can just plug that injector into AC power, run the LAN in, run the LAN out with PoE, and power your phone that way. So it's very easy to do, and you have options. How many VSETs do you need? Well, you probably want at least one per studio, but we'll be delighted if you'd put more than that in each studio. Anybody who needs to have control, anybody who needs to pick up the phone, anybody who needs to do call screening could or should have a VSET. So there you go. You can have, as far as I know, about as many VSETs as you like associated with each show. Call management software, you have options here too. Along with each VX phone system, you get a free license for the Broadcast Bionics product called X-Screen Lite. It looks like, I'm showing the phone box here in the upper right-hand picture. That's phone box from Broadcast Bionics, but X-Screen Lite looks pretty similar to that. And that's what you get for free. It's the Lite version. It runs 2 workstations, so you can get that. There's also, you can download the Telos branded VX Producer software. Some folks like that. And both of these have full audio. Both of them do recording if you want to record a caller, and both of them let you do simple editing and play the caller back. A couple of other options that are paid. In the lower left corner there, you see from Arctic Palm, it's CS Call Management. And so that lets you run the VX system as well. And then there's also, in the lower right part of the screen, Neo Screener from the Neo Group out of Paris, France. A lot of big stations love this particular package. So you ought to look at them, look in the brochures, look at their websites, and see which one you might like if you want to do some call management, call screening. So now I hope that this diagram makes a bit more sense. The VX engine sits in the middle. It takes the SIP calls in. It gives them a place to sit, a place to ring. It groups lines into shows. It assigns shows to studios. That is the actual physical I/O from the studios. And you can put your VSET phones on either side, WAN or LAN. You can put your call screening computers on either network, WAN or LAN. And, of course, on the LAN side, that's where your studio-grade audio comes out and goes to the studios. A couple more things to look at closely. Livewire studio audio distribution. So if you're not in a Livewire environment, you're going to be putting in a switch like this, and you're going to put in some nodes and distribute audio via Livewire to those nodes, and that's where you get your audio I/O. So just another picture to help you get in your mind clearly how you accomplish that. If you need any advice on switches, we've got it right there online. Go to axiaaudio.com/switches, and you'll see all the approved Cisco switches that can work with Livewire. And, of course, there's the Axia X switch as well. Now, I want to tell you, the studio side, all that Livewire stuff, even if you're new to it, that's the easy part, because we've been installing Livewire systems for 10 years now. Our support guys can talk you right through it. We get it. It's easy. There's over 5,000 Axia consoles around the world, so no problem to help you with that. It's been done for a long time. And if you're not new to Axia, well, then you just plug it. You're going to plug this VX engine's Livewire port into your LAN and just go to town on your keyboard, and you're going to be done pretty quickly. The telco side, however, that's where things get a little interesting, and you might need some consulting, and we're happy to provide that. We offer on-site consulting and telephone consulting, both at cost, but we can do some simple things for free over the phone. We're happy to help out as much as we possibly can, although some situations really demand an on-site consulting or configuration visit. Now, I want to point out, the Telos VX engine speaks very standardized SIP. In fact, some of the guys who developed the Telos VX and are still developing it, they have contributed to the whole SIP standards and to the Asterisk project. So we got people who know all about SIP, and the VX is very standard. However, most broadcast engineers don't know much about this protocol, including me. 2 years ago, I didn't know much about it at all. I started experimenting with it, and it can be pretty cool. So some SIP providers, I want to point out, are less than standard. If you get SIP out of your business PBX, well, that may not be entirely standard SIP. They may have added some extra features or left some things out. Now, most of this we can work around just fine, but just want you to know that there may be some give and take, some difficulty or some issues in getting started with SIP. especially if it comes from a PBX or maybe from a provider that's not all that familiar with it themselves, or they're just getting started with it. So you need to allow yourself some time to hook that up. But what we find is that, if the entity, the provider, the equipment that's providing SIP into your Telos VX, if they know what they're doing and it's standardized, then we connect right up to it without problem. But we're here to help no matter what the case. So what about your phone lines? This is where we get a ton of questions. So I'm going to quickly go through this again and give you some visual references as to how to bring phone lines into a Telos VX. 5 different ways. Number 1, you can convert existing phone lines into SIP using a gateway device. These gateways are available from a capacity of 2 lines up to 32 lines. So that's certainly doable. We happen to like the patent gateways, but there are other brands that work just fine as well. And we're happy to work with your telco consultant. If you have a consultant locally that you like, we'll be glad to talk to that person about what works well. So converting existing lines to SIP, one way to do it. You can also convert your existing lines to SIP using an asterisk-based SIP server. This is very common. It does give you some extra functionality, as I mentioned earlier, like playing a disclaimer, a legal disclaimer announcement out to callers. It can fix caller ID problems. Sometimes telcos have very interesting caller ID, and a gateway just doesn't deal with it so well since it's kind of a fixed appliance. Well, asterisk is kind of like the, here's a Star Wars reference. Asterisk is kind of like the C-3PO of SIP protocols. It really is good at gluing different things together. So, and as far as asterisk, you can roll your own. You can get local help from an asterisk reseller or consultant. Or you can go to us. We can provide plenty of on-site assistance with asterisk. We've set this up for many, many people. And using either your hardware or hardware that you would buy from one of our dealers or some off-the-shelf server hardware. Lots of ways to go about this. And then you put cards in the asterisk SIP server to bring in your existing telco. So there's 2 ways to do it. Third way, use a modern business PBX phone system to provide you with studio lines in SIP format. So the same PBX that makes your office phones work can also give SIP to the Telos VX. Occasionally there's some issues here because Avaya or Nortel or whoever these systems may come from, sometimes they're not quite as standard as we'd like, but so far we've been able to work with each and every one of them. So you may already have SIP in your business PBX, and you could use that. One little caveat to know about. The people who provide business PBXs like this, they may not want to turn on extra SIP extensions for free. They may want an annual license fee to do that. With an asterisk PBX that you may provide, there isn't such a fee, unless you're paying support to a company that's provided the asterisk to you. So just be aware that it can, not everybody, but it can cost you an annual support fee or licensing fee to get SIP out of a business PBX. Another way, bring native SIP connections in from a dedicated SIP provider like Verizon, AT&T, Windstream, or XO. So, and again, they may be able to provide wire and fiber right to your facility and give you a demarc point, kind of like you've been used to with the good old telco provider for the last few decades. And finally, the 5th way, bring native SIP connections in from a cloud SIP provider with a new or existing internet connection. Over the public internet, you're going to want a good connection. You're probably going to want a dedicated connection for this. Although if your corporate connection is just fabulous, then you might be able to use that too. If you know something about packet prioritization or traffic shaping, that can be a real benefit so you don't get dropouts. You don't want this on a connection where there's people in your building running, say, BitTorrent or watching lots of Netflix. You don't want that if you can handle it. You want to have just the phone calls on there if you can. So, should I move to SIP? Well, we don't insist that you do. There's other ways to bring your existing lines in. But know this, SIP is becoming commonplace in business settings. Not so much yet for broadcast engineers, but we're changing that. SIP is actually fun, and it's manageable. You can play with it. It's much more fun than telco-provided services, once you know the ins and outs. Telos VX is fully compatible with asterisk-based SIP phone systems, as well as Cisco Call Manager-based phone systems. And we've had good success with Avaya and Nortel systems too, but work has been required to accommodate those. What about multiple SIP sources? Hey, can I have my own SIP server? And can I bring in SIP from the outside world? And can I have a gateway for some old, let's say some old trunk lines that I need to bring in? Some choke lines. Well, the answer is yes, you can do that. Many Telos VX systems are using several sources of phone lines to get the best utility for the broadcaster. The VX engine can obtain phone lines from several SIP servers or gateways at the same time. Your Telos sales manager and your Telos support specialist are available to consult with you to help you figure out the best approach to a successful phone system integration. All right, let's take a quick look now at the actual Telos VX itself. And I'm not going to give you a whole tutorial on how to set it up, but I want to show you a few of the configuration pages that you can use to set it up, just to let you know kind of what's there. What do you have to know about? First of all, we browse into the Telos VX. Hey, the only thing on the front panel of the VX is a little screen that shows you everything's okay, or there's a power supply dead, there's a network connection not working, and then you can go into a small menu to give it an IP address there at the front panel of the unit itself. Once that's done, though, everything else is done with a web GUI. So you just browse into it, and here's the main page. We go here and we can configure the IP address, of course. You can configure the WAN services, the time zone that you're in. If you want to keep the clock accurate using NTP from the internet, you can certainly do that. You can update the passwords there if you like. So that's the main thing. Now there's a page for configuring SIP. Now you may notice that I have obliterated, grayed out, fuzzed out the SIP server IP addresses that should not be public information, if you know what I mean. But here you go. This is where you set up the SIP servers that you're looking at, or the gateways that you're looking at. And I'm looking at two different ones here. I'm looking at the Telos Business Asterisk server. That's in Cleveland, Ohio, hundreds of miles from my office in Nashville. And several of my phone lines come from that, over the public internet and through my regular office internet connection. I also have a local SIP server. It's actually a $35 Raspberry Pi computer, and it works just fine. It's running some software called Incredible Pi, or maybe it's Incredible PBX, I forget which. But anyway, I named it Incredible Pi, and there it is as a SIP server. So I've got two SIP servers that my Telos VX is looking at. We can look at some details on a typical SIP server. Again, this is the one at Telos. So it's got an IP address, which is a public IP address in this case, because we have outside people, including myself, who need access to it. We have extension numbers that have been assigned to me for this purpose. To grab an extension, in other words, to register a product like the Telos VX, to register that and to obtain those phone lines, what you do is you register them, which means logging in. You give it an extension number, an authorized user name, which typically is the same as the extension number, and then a password, which is secret, and then bam, you can add a new one down here in this dialog. There's where you enter the extension number. You tell that, yeah, I do want to register this. You can have an expiration period on it. That's a feature that some people need. And then authorized user, again, is typically the same number as the extension, and then authorized passwords. You click add, bam, you've got a new line there. Let's take a look at the Incredible Pi. Here we have the local IP address of that on my network. Give it a friendly name, Incredible Pi. I have extension 102. I've told it to register. There's the username, which is the same as the extension, and then there's a password involved. I can also show which studio and show that it is currently associated with. So there it is. It's in use by the Lab Desk Studio and the Kirk Radio Show. So let's explain studios and shows real quickly. In the studio configuration, this is where, and I wish I had more to show you, but I've only got one studio defined. This is where we describe the I/O capabilities of a given studio, because they're going to be probably different for each studio. In other words, it's going to be a different destination. Whether you're using Axia consoles or whether you're using LiveWire nodes to get audio in and out, here's where you're going to define these things. By the way, even though I have a console here, I'm actually just using nodes and channels to get audio in and out. But you'll assign a LiveWire channel number to the any fixed lines and any selectable lines. You'll define the LiveWire channel for program on hold. And then if you want to turn on a feature called the Acoustic Echo Canceller, you can do this too. This is typically used in television studios when you have an open mic and open speakers with a live studio audience. Very effective at canceling echo. It's a Fraunhofer invention there. And you can also assign your GPIOs here for muting things and for putting lines on hold and just for showing what's going on with GPIO. So we define studios by what's physically in the studio. What's our destination? What are our sources with that studio? Then we go and we describe shows. We define shows. I only have one defined right here. It's Kirk Radio. There are 6 lines in it, and the first 3 lines are rollover. So they are all based on the same extension, but they roll over because this extension will handle many instances of the extension. So that's how you get to control rollover. There's my local Incredible Pi with extension 102. That's listed right there. There's this Pizza Guy line extension from there. And then there's the Kirk Hotline, which is another extension from Telos, from our Asterisk system. So there you go. That's how we have set up that show. And you're probably not going to be able to see it real well on the screen, but if I show you a phone, this is a VSET, which is tied into that show right now. And so it has those lines. And I'm sorry it's so reflective, you probably can't see it very well with that camera. But the same lines that you see on screen there are exactly the same lines that I have showing from this camera. We'll see if we can fix that in post and let you have a better look. A couple more things to look at. There's call audio processing. So you can define the audio processing from Omnia that's going on to each phone call. And so that's pretty cool. Then you can also define the call progress tones. This is one of the cool things about SIP, that you can define what the dial tone sounds like, define what the ringback tone sounds like, the caller hang-up, all these disposition tones. We have default tones in the VX for the USA and for the EU, but if you want to upload your own call progress tones, you certainly can. There's also DTMF tones. These are already in there, but you could give it different ones if you want to do. And there's different ringtones that you can give it. Just like your cell phone, you can have different ringtones to use. Couple more things. You can get studio information about each studio, what's actually in use. The acoustic echo canceller is disabled now, which devices are associated with that studio and what their IP addresses are and the ports in use, and the lines that are in use. You can see here are the lines that are for my show that I've defined. Here's one that's not working. That Pizza Guy line is actually not working, and that's because I had the folks at Telos turn that one off so we could show you what it looked like when it didn't work. So, but the rest of them, whether they're coming from our Asterisk at Telos or from my Incredible Pi, they're sitting there working. There are no active calls right now, but if there were, they'd show up there. And then we can also look at the devices. Normally, this would be a much longer list for a cluster of stations. Other things you can do, look at status of the entire system, what the cores are doing, the system health, CPU usage, and temperatures and all that kind of thing. And then you can also back up and restore the whole VX right here. Plus, you can choose which firmware version to use right here. Once you set this up, you're probably not going to have to deal with any of this after it's set up the first time, but it's always there in case you do need to. Hey, thanks very much for your attention. I appreciate it. We are going to have some shorter versions of this video answering some specific questions in short snippets. So if you don't want to sit through another whole hour of this, you can certainly look up those videos on the Telos Alliance TV YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, search for Telos Alliance TV, and you should find us there. Thanks for your attention. We appreciate you very much. Talk to you later.